So the Board of Directors for the Down Syndrome Association begins their planning for the Buddy Walk every year in the spring. So our committee was formed and had initial meetings in March and April as COVID was starting to become more and more prevalent in our community, and then we went into lockdown. So we continued having planning meetings, but with the hope and the idea that we were moving ahead with a live event that it'll be gone by then, by October or November. So we evaluated continuously during our monthly meetings what we were going to do, but as we talked about the practical issues of a live event with bounce houses for children filled with kids, donated food from businesses that were currently closed down and not making any money, donated food that was buffet style with people picking it up, touching it, and with the very little we knew about COVID at that point, and certainly we knew very little, as did anyone, about the impact of COVID on people with Down syndrome themselves. So we made the decision that by June, we were going to make a decision whether we were moving ahead or not with a live event versus a virtual. Want me to just keep talking?
I'll edit around.
Okay.
Just tell me the story. So come June, you were going to make a decision, and you said, all right.
So I began doing, as well as one of our board members, a little bit of research about how we could offer a virtual event. So I was paying attention and Googling as much as anybody and following other nonprofit leaders about how and what you were doing. There were a few events that I was aware of that had gone virtual at that point around the country, but for the most part, groups were just simply canceling their fundraisers. So that was very scary because, again, the Buddy Walk is our only fundraiser for the year.
It's not just a fundraiser, it's also that outreach. That's how you get your message out. That's how you create and keep engagement, right?
Correct. The Buddy Walk is a huge part of our marketing, community outreach, not just to families, but to healthcare providers and educators and community colleagues and partners in terms of exhibitors at this event. It's an event that normally gets 1,000 attendees in this tiny park in this tiny little town in Cocoa, Florida. So yes, it was a huge deal, and we were scared to cancel it. We were scared to go virtual. None of us had any experience doing that. The little bit that I was learning about going virtual was, okay, you're going to have to manage live parts, you're going to have to manage pre-recorded parts, you're going to have to pick your platforms as to whether you're going on Zoom or Facebook Live, or you're going to make all your attendees download a specific app that's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars. So it was a lot to sort of learn, and I think what we all learned was that we were scared and none of us had the bandwidth to do that ourselves.
So at some point, you came into contact with Omni, and that was through a mutual acquaintance in Mike Allen, if I remember right?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how you ended up talking with Omni and how that ended up going for you. What was that process like, the discussions?
So I had been doing a lot of demos with different online technology businesses throughout the spring and early summer, again, as I was trying to teach myself how on earth am I going to do this and manage this by myself and keep it low cost. And simultaneously, a good friend of mine in the community who I had twisted his arm to serve on the association's audit committee connected with me and said, do you want any resources? I'm working with a company called Omni Productions, great guy. They're doing some work for us for my business, which was security financial management. And he did a formal email introduction. And I will say honestly, I lumped this into the same category of this is another one of these companies trying to take financial advantage of the moment, which I didn't blame any of these companies, but I thought, okay, Mike connected me. I know Mike, I respect Mike. I'll look into it, but it's probably not going to happen. Was really how it came together. So I responded to that, and we set up an initial virtual meeting online with the folks at Omni, and everything they said and described was like the angels chorus behind me, like, this is it. This could be the answer. But can I get the board of directors to sign on board, because it's going to cost some money? So we had some conversations. I tried to anticipate what my board and my committees would care most about knowing. But really, as Omni described the process and described the storyline that we would create for this virtual event, the biggest pieces that I think appealed to everyone were that they would handle the filming. So while we were all seeing videos by nonprofits where they were doing their own iPhone, cell phone videos, and that was fine in the first month or two of this. People expected sort of, not as professional quality. But as we progressed through this quarantine and saw other events going virtual, people ratcheted up their expectations of what they looked like. So to have somebody who could handle that beautifully, and probably most importantly, all of the technology with an event going live, I don't know much about managing it, but I can tell you everything I read and learned during my learning curve was you need to have multiple people on deck, and you need to have planned for those technological snafus. And I knew, again, that this committee didn't have the capacity to do that. So it was going to be me and whoever else I could get involved. And I couldn't really think of anybody who had a lot of comfort level with that aspect of it. So much to my surprise and delight, when we finally worked out a lot of the details, which was probably in a matter of 2 weeks from my initial conversation with the folks at Omni, I was able to bring that to the board of directors and Buddy Walk committee, and I thought that they were going to push back hard on this costing us money. This was a group that was used to everyone donating their goods and services for the benefit of the Buddy Walk. And I will say Omni was so very generous with their expertise. We were essentially just, with what they proposed to us, covering the expenses of their crew to come do a film day. And so much of it, because we were a charity, was donated. And again, much to my delight and pleasant surprise, everyone on this board and committee understood that and said, we are fools if we don't approve this. That this is money well worth spending. But again, from an organization and volunteers who had never spent a dime for professional services before.
Interesting. Wow, I did not know that. Wow. Let's talk a little bit about the actual Buddy Walk and the day of filming, where we captured all of the elements and that day at Riverfront Park. Just tell me a little bit about the experience.
So in the middle of October, our event was scheduled to go live the first week of November. We scheduled a day with Omni to film families, sponsors, board members, self-advocates, individuals with Down syndrome themselves, on site at the park where we would normally host the Buddy Walk. So we wanted to capture the feel. And a lot of this came from the genius of the people at Omni who understood that we were trying to capture the same feel, the same look, the same spirit and energy of this celebration that we had every year. But also taking it a step further in terms of it being a real message to a broader community, more community outreach and marketing than we ever could have had before because of the virtual component. So the day we scheduled probably 15 interviews with different individuals throughout the day on this beautiful park. The weather cooperated, and it was all socially distanced. We were all wearing our masks except for when we were doing interviews. But it was truly amazing. That day of the actual filming was as close to the feel of a buddy walk itself. When everyone left that night, at the end of the day, I think the Omni crew felt good about what they captured and heard. I felt tremendous about what we had heard. The feeling that everybody got who participated in it, whether they were close to the organization or more on the outskirts of the organization, had maybe not even attended a buddy walk, but had received perhaps a service from the organization, they were really touched and moved and energized, and everyone left feeling like the power of that moment and that day.
Let's fast forward to a few weeks later. Once we had those stories built, then we decided on let's bridge the gaps with a host. And tell me about the experience of writing the copy and getting Eric Kohler involved and shooting him in the studio and then making it appear as if he was at Riverfront Park.
So one of the key pieces for us, I think, in putting together the final packaged virtual event and video was that Omni had the idea and they had the close contact with somebody I just happened to know in the Down syndrome community, but really the contact came via Omni, was what about engaging a host, an anchor for this event, where we would script what we heard in the park in the interviews to tie all of these pieces together and to have sort of themed segments. And we wouldn't really be able to do that if there wasn't a key person to put those together. So Omni brought in Eric Kohler, who was a neighbor and friend of Steve with Omni. And again, Eric is a friend and contact of mine over the years as well, because he happens to have a son with Down syndrome. And he serves as, in the past, as the voice of UCF football and basketball. He has a sports talk radio show here in the Orlando market. Again, because of his connection with UCF, not only did he have the anchor expertise and professionalism, the family connection through Down syndrome, but in our market, UCF nights are a big deal. So even if you didn't personally know who Eric Kohler was, you'd recognize the voice, you'd recognize the university and the connection. So that was a really big deal. We brought Eric in to film for a day. The Omni team and I went back and forth on really very simple, easy scripting for each of those segments for Eric to introduce. I think he ended up being in the studio for all of an hour at the most. And it went so smoothly and beautifully, and again, far easier than I had anticipated. Right.
It's up to, I think, over 2,000 views now.
Yeah, and I don't understand the whole how many views versus the reach. The reach is like in the 7,000s or something.
Right.
Yeah.
But it got a lot of play.
It did. So our virtual event was on Saturday, November 7th. It went live at 10 a.m., which really meant the Omni team hit the button. I just got to enjoy, as did my entire board of directors, as well as our Buddy Walk committee, just got to enjoy watching it. It appeared live. Our families, our supporters saw it live on Facebook Live. It was also on YouTube for those who weren't on Facebook. And, you know, starting out initially, it was that I could see that there were maybe 25 people viewing it. And then I could see that there were 50. And I could see that, you know, early on there were 2 or 3 shares. And all of a sudden there were 40 shares. And then there were 50 and 60 shares. So people were picking up on it and watching it. But even after it was live at 10 a.m., the momentum kept building and going all throughout the weekend and even into Monday and Tuesday of the next week. So unlike the live event where at noon on Saturday we would have been done and closed up shop and said, that's it for our fundraising, we raised X dollars, we're done, those funds kept coming in too. So not only did we get the traction of the reach, which I didn't check before we talked today, but it was well over 1,800 views with a Facebook reach, not counting the YouTube views, of 6,000 to 7,000 people only a few days later. But in addition to that, we've had at least an additional $4,000 or $5,000 roll in fundraising after the event was over, which has never happened before. And to the point about the fundraising aspect of it, we had redone our numbers when we made the decision this past summer, a few months ago, to go virtual. We were not expecting fundraising to be anywhere near what it normally was. So normally we would, you know, hope to raise between $40,000 or $50,000 for this event. So we revised our budget, and in our budget, our realistic but somewhat hopeful number for the Buddy Walk was $13,000. We made a committee goal that we thought was a stretch of $25,000, and we made a super way in the sky goal of $50,000. Today, we're at about $48,500. And I just got off the phone this morning, and I know we have an additional $3,000 coming in from checks that have not been collected and reconciled yet. So we have topped our pie in the sky goal of $50,000, and we absolutely wouldn't have done that without Omni's expertise. But more than their expertise, that freed up my entire team of volunteers to not focus on what could go wrong with the technology and the production and how on earth are we going to do this. They could focus their efforts on outreach, fundraising, sponsorships, prize incentives, just to keep that online engagement and interaction going, which is so critical to having a successful event.
Very good. Well, that's fantastic. I didn't realize that you
So we had a number of people for a variety of reasons that we absolutely wanted to film, but they could not make the day that we filmed at the actual venue where the Buddy Walk was traditionally held. So we ended up using the green screen in Omni's production studios, where we brought them in, filmed against a green screen, which is where I'm at today too. And then Omni was able to place them in the park. So that was the case for Eric, who served as our host for the event. It was also the case for Jim Payne, a local anchor from Channel 2, who shot a bunch of promotional videos for us in advance. So they were able to place them actually in the park, so it seemed perfectly seamless in the virtual event that everyone was at different places in the park, sitting on a bench in front of the playground, in front of the river, and it was beautifully done. And as a non-technical, non-TV production person, I had never really appreciated the power of the green screen, but it was pretty magical. So post event, our board and volunteers have met virtually once, and everybody is so thrilled with how the virtual Buddy Walk went off. All of the feedback from friends, family, those that we serve, our partners and sponsors of the event, as well as our internal team of the folks that pulled it all together. Everyone has just only had the most positive things to say about the virtual event, which hosting a live Buddy Walk, usually people have some complaints. Most people love it, but so that in and of itself is unusual and fantastic to come off everybody feeling great about what happened. We've already, of course, started thinking, as everyone is what do the next few months, what do the next few years bring in terms of what we think is going to happen with COVID, what we hear. And the biggest lesson we've learned is that during this time frame is we don't really know for sure what's going to happen 3 months out or 6 months out or 9 months out, or certainly 12 months out as we think about a walk in 2021. So we are hoping and praying that it goes live next year, but I believe our committee and our volunteers are fully prepared and less scared and afraid to go virtual for this or for other events, but knowing that you just have to have the right people and the right team in place who know how to do it right. In terms of the resources of the organization, I can see a new family being diagnosed with a baby with Down syndrome and somebody saying to them, I just watched this great video or event last week or a few weeks ago from the Down Syndrome Association in Brevard. Here, I'll send it to you. And just from that new family would know what we offered and how to reach us. So that's pretty powerful. But as we look at next year, I would say we're going to continually be looking at what's going on with restrictions in terms of an event that has hundreds or thousands of people at a government county-wide park that also has restrictions in place. So I think we've already got our plan A process in place, but we've got our plan B as well, and I think that gives the whole team just so much confidence now. Unlike a live event where you are limited to the locale, the venue itself, and how many people can make it out there that day in that time frame, for the virtual event, our families were able to invite their extended friends and family from not just all over the country, but all over the world if they chose to. So rather than a local event that served 800, 900 people that day, we were able to engage thousands from all over to participate and see and hear their loved one in a much more direct way than they would have if it had been a live event where the most they could have done to say, I love you, I care about you, I support you, is a $25 donation to Team Evan. Instead, they were able to celebrate with Team Evan and see him run off in our blooper reel. But that was just one example of ways that people could connect with a virtual event that captured the spirit, but it went so far much beyond what we could have done with a day of live event only.